Tim Fawcett, Monday the 15th of January 24. Question 1, what's your background? I was only ever interested in art at school, and I realised it was one thing I could do well and I loved. And by my teens, I was heavily into the music scene, in particular punk bands like the Pistols and the Clash. I loved that these guys were tearing up the history books, and the whole ethos was that anyone can do it, and if you had conviction and something to say at least, you didn't have to be a virtuoso musician. The same applies with my art practice to this day. I also learned that from that period that sentimental love songs had been done to death, and so bands like The Clash were singing about everyday life and politics, which resonated with me as a youngster, and it still does, which is my main drive when I paint. I had a relatively privileged upbringing, but learned in later life that this had been a very cosy and unrealistic bubble, especially growing up in the university town of Cambridge, where many friends and families were in some way related to or employed by the university. I went out of my way probably to mix with a broader diversity of people, and at Art College in Sunderland I met people of many cultures and backgrounds and underprivileged folk who I felt a special bond with. This was partly due to my family heritage also being from the working class northeastern side of the country, and I was very proud of that. I still am. These are, after all, my roots. Therefore, it was probably already ingrained that social injustice was what drives me to express myself in a visual language. How does this impact how you see the world and create art? Did your upbringing skip all that? Who are your biggest influences? Well, too many artists to mention for a start, but in particular, well, how do I put this? Originally, I was absolutely obsessed with Francis Bacon, Edvard Munch, Vincent van Gogh, but I'm going back to my student years. Since then, I'm way more interested in artists such as Cy Twombly, Guston, Motherwell, Tracy Emin. But besides visual art, musicians, as I mentioned before, The Clash, of course, and Steel Pulse, especially for their lyrical subject matter and their honesty. Aside from that, my partner and fellow artist, Cathy Williams, is a huge influence on me, and we can talk for hours about art. So that's, she has shaped my understanding quite a bit. Okay, next question. What are you focusing on right now? Well, I'm focusing on a chair series that's been running, I guess, for about 3 months. I had been, maybe for a year or two, finding a motif that I can then explore and develop and often use as a metaphor. I was working on the shape, form of a cactus, which was a metaphor. Well, it was also named, what was it called? The Devil's Tongue. And that was quite a useful metaphor to use last year. But right at the moment, I'm painting chairs, broken chairs. Chairs, to me, kind of represent, or I'm using them to represent people and situations and relationships. Besides that, they're abstracted and they're gestural. So that's also important to get this kind of honesty coming out through just the use of paint itself. But also equally important, I think, is the compositional balance or imbalance which kind of creates some dialogue across the picture plane. That's really important to me. What is the biggest challenge of being an artist? Well, no doubt the same as most artists. The vast majority, it's keeping the cash flow going. It's a difficult one, but it's something we have to. It comes with the territory, unfortunately, and it's something we all have to deal with. I'm working usually 6 days a week from the studio, but even when I'm not there, I'll be researching, or talking with fellow artists to just get a better understanding of what it is that we do and why. What advice would you give to your younger self? I would just say, stick with it. You'll find a way to keep painting or making, and you will develop and grow in your own time. But don't listen to the doubters. Be honest with yourself. Don't copy others. Just work, work, work. Next question. Have you ever tried any unconventional mediums or techniques? Well, of course. And I'd still like to broaden my techniques in other areas, especially I'd like to do three-dimensional work, sculpture and installation. I'd also quite like to explore video, but we'll see what happens. Do you listen to music or have any other type of background noise while you work, or do you prefer complete silence? Well, I almost always have either music or current affairs on the radio, which I enjoy, in political debate. It kind of fires me up, basically. So that's really important. Occasionally I work in silence, but rarely. What's the best reaction someone's had to your artwork? It wasn't an art fair. It was an open studio a few years back. A woman just burst into tears at the sight of a quite a drippy and distorted painting, a large Head and Shoulders of Tracy Emin, painted in household gloss paint. And she later bought the piece. I'd never seen anybody so struck by a painting at all, let alone mine. She did buy it, thank goodness. And we're still friends ever since then. We've remained friends since buying. What do you hope people take away from your artwork? I hope people feel challenged on one hand, and on the other, I hope they see something in it that I haven't. It's all about discovery, I suppose. My social handles are Instagram is timfawcett_art. My website is www.timfawcett.co.uk, and I rarely use my Facebook social, so I'll leave that for now. Okay, I hope this works out. Any questions? Please fire away. Thanks, Dan.